And our thoughts are with the president this morning and his family following the passing of President Trump's younger brother, Robert Trump, yesterday. He was 71 years old. President Trump visited him in a New York City hospital on Friday before traveling to Bedminster, New Jersey for an event. His senior advisor and son-in-law, Jared Kushner, is there with him this weekend, and he joins me now. Jared, our condolences to you and family. I want to discuss this week's historic peace deal between Israel and the UAE. But first, how are you doing? How's the president doing?
Thank you very much, Maria. The president's doing well. I was with him last night in the family when he got the unfortunate news. He loved his brother very much. It's obviously a very difficult time for him in that regard, but again, he loved his brother. He was happy he got a chance to see him, and they had a great relationship and many good memories together. So hopefully he'll continue to do great things and make his brother proud.
Jared, I want to talk about this historic peace deal between Israel and the UAE, which, of course, you were so critical in putting together. Tell me the most important parts of this deal as you see it today.
So this deal is really the culmination of 3.5 years of incredible diplomacy by President Trump. President Trump started his administration with his first foreign trip, where he went to Riyadh, where he addressed the 54 Muslim nations. Then he went to Israel, where he met with the Jewish leaders, and then he went to Rome, where he met with the Pope and other leaders. And so President Trump has set out a course to really change the Middle East and to try to bring more peace to the world. This was a great culmination of it, and there's a lot of steps along the way. We hosted a conference in Warsaw where we brought the Middle East closer together. We hosted a conference in Bahrain where we brought everyone together. And, you know, even the president's steps that he took, which were widely criticized in the foreign policy world, like moving the embassy to Jerusalem, was a very critical step. That showed people in the region that, number one, President Trump, unlike past politicians, keeps his promises, and he won't be bullied out of doing things that he thinks is right. And that strength and courage of conviction allowed him to build very strong relationships with our regional allies that had previously been forsaken. And that confidence that they both had in him allowed them to take this historic step forward. And I'll also say that one of the other critical steps along the way was President Trump getting out of the disastrous Iran deal. That deal sent $150 billion to the largest state sponsor of terrorism, one of the worst deals perhaps in history. And President Trump's leadership has greatly constrained the reach of a big menace in the region.
Yeah, I think you make a lot of good points, and all of these efforts for the last 3.5 years have yielded true impact and success. I feel like the idea of peace in the Middle East has been going on decades, but there was a relationship in place between you and Bibi Netanyahu, the president, and Bibi Netanyahu. Was that really the trigger that allowed the United Arab Emirates and its leadership in Abu Dhabi to say now is the time to actually listen and to try to come to the middle? I think Netanyahu giving up the settlements and putting a pause to that in the West Bank is critical. Tell me how your personal relationships, the president's relationships, really got this done.
Right. So relationships are one thing, and obviously you have to be able to have trust and know that you can have freewheeling discussions. We didn't come to the region to lecture people. We came to listen to people and then to understand what were their best interests and then find commonality. When President Trump moved the embassy to Jerusalem, a lot of people criticized and says, well, he didn't ask for anything in return. And President Trump's point of view on that was that, first of all, you don't have to get something for keeping your promise. You shouldn't be getting something for doing the right thing. You should just do the right thing. But what he got out of that, which very few foreign policy experts saw, was he got the trust of the Israeli people and he got the trust of Israel. It showed that he was doing things for the right reasons, and that trust has enabled him to get Israel to make some tougher decisions that they wouldn't have made otherwise, perhaps under a different administration. And obviously with the United Arab Emirates, they felt very betrayed by America with the past administration. The Iran deal was a terrible betrayal of the region, and American leadership in the region had really pulled back. If you think about America's foreign policy interests in the Middle East previously, it was about energy, and under President Trump's leadership, America is now energy independent as a country, so that's greatly reduced our dependence on the Middle East, which is critical. Americans don't want to have too much war there. The past administrations have lost, trillions of dollars and too many soldiers in the Middle East, and bringing people together and creating peace like President Trump was able to do here greatly reduces our need to have troops in the region. And then finally, a big threat to us and to the whole region is radical extremism. And President Trump, on his first trip to Saudi Arabia, the the custodian of the two holy sites, was able to create agreements amongst the Arab world to do a counter-terror finance center, where now, over the last 3.5 years, we've seen a significantly less amount of money going to terror organizations, and then a counter-extremism center where we're fighting the long-term online battle against extremism online. President Trump also was able to destroy the territorial caliphate of ISIS and kill their leader, and that also creates a lot more stability in the region. So it's really been through his actions that he's earned the trust not just of these two leaders, but of everyone else in the region. And people know that they may not always like every decision he takes, but he's going to do it from a position of strength. And he's the first leader who's really moved peace around in the region. And obviously, this is the first peace agreement in the last 26 years. So it's a amazing breakthrough and accomplishment that only President Trump, the deal-maker president, could have done.
Well, you mentioned all of the strategies that the United States has had in the Middle East for years, and it is energy. You've got this huge military footprint based on all of the wars that we've had. And then, of course, the biggest threat is extremism. This sort of speaks to all of that. But I want to ask you what this means going forward, because in an interview last week, you suggested that this is the beginning of something broader. So number one is, was MBS, the head of Saudi Arabia, consulted on this? Would the Saudis be next in terms of recognizing Israel? And what else do you see happening as a result of this throughout the Middle East?
So part of the trust that we've built with all the leaders is that we don't disclose publicly a lot of the discussions that happen privately. People were actually quite amazed that this deal didn't leak out. It really, the news broke with the president's tweet, and that's a great thing. This really is a paradigm shift. And what President Trump has tried to do for the last 3 years is he recognized that a lot of the approaches taken in the Middle East in the previous administrations just didn't work and weren't serving America's interests. President Trump is an American-first president. He's always putting the interests of Americans first, and he tried to take an America-first approach here. And what he did was he tried to align the different countries in the region around their common interests, as opposed to focusing on historic grievances. And again, over the last 3.5 years, people were saying that President Trump's actions would lead to another world war, that they wouldn't be successful. And it was because he was doing policies that were based on common sense, not based on traditional diplomatic approaches. And obviously, this is an amazing fruit that's been born from those efforts. But I will say that going forward, this shows people that things are possible. I believe that many people had grown hopeless in the Middle East because they've just seen years of failure, and they didn't believe that things could change. And so the problems became very fixed. But one by one, piece by piece, President Trump has slaughtered a lot of the sacred cows. He's used some blunt force instruments, but he's taken out a lot of the problems that existed and held the region back for years. And if you look at the younger generation, whether you're Israeli or Saudi or Emirati, they want to have better lives. And in order to do that, they need to have a secure environment. They need to be free of terror, free of the radicalizers, and they need to have economic opportunities so that they can feel like their children can have a better life than they have.
So should we believe that this could be the beginning of an affront or a continuation of a front against Iran? At some point, perhaps Hezbollah becomes less important and not running things in that part of the world. And what about China? Because, Jared, you really have been critical to the president's foreign policy in a number of areas. You helped lead in terms of the biggest trade deal ever, Mexico and Canada. You were behind the deal with China, phase one. You did an OPEC deal. You also did criminal justice reform. Of course, you also did leadership on the wall. Where are we on that? And I know that China has a lot of business with the UAE. You know, the UAE sells almost all of its oil to China. Are we going to get to a position where they're going to have to choose the U.S. or China, given the fact that there's such tension between the two countries now? I know there's a lot there, but give us your sense on the impact on Iran and China, and then let's end off with the wall, because I know our audience is interested in hearing where we are on that.
Absolutely. So I would say that before President Trump came in, the direction was very clear. Most of the countries in the Middle East were heading towards China because America had totally given up its leadership role in the region and had betrayed all of its allies by doing the dangerous Iran deal that gave them a glide path to a nuclear weapon and empowered them to cause more instability throughout the region. This is a big sign that people in the region want to be with America long term. We just need to be a consistent and strong leader in terms of bringing people together around common interests. The president's Iran strategy has been very simple, which is he thought the deal that was made previously was the worst deal perhaps in history. You had a deal that was signed where you sent them a couple $1 billion in cash, $150 billion total, gave them a glide path to a nuclear weapon, and the day they signed it, they weren't saying thank you, America. They were in the streets saying death to America, death to Israel, and then trying to divide the Middle East. So that was a big problem. And President Trump has brought people back into the orbit. He's been able to accomplish this historic breakthrough. And I do think that, for the last couple of years, perhaps I've been the only optimistic person about the Middle East. But I think after this deal, everyone else is believing that so many things could be possible and that we could put old differences aside and focus on new shared opportunities. And then with regards to the wall, that's moving incredibly fast. That was a project that President Trump promised during his last election. The border right now is more secure than ever before, which is critical in the age of coronavirus in terms of stopping illegal drugs, human trafficking, and illegal smuggling. And we have about 300 miles of the wall that will be completed, and we are on pace right now to surpass our goal of 450 miles by the end of the year. And the Border Patrol is thrilled. They are, I believe, going to be endorsing the president, and they believe that that every mile of wall makes their operations more efficient because it's less manpower they have to spread out over fewer amount of unobtruded crossing potential areas.
Well, it makes a lot of sense. I totally understand. Jared, it's great to have you this morning. Thanks very much, sir.